Hello, Homestead. This is Mr. Giglio, principal of Homestead High School, here to talk to you and take a few moments of your day to talk about 9/11. This is the 20th anniversary of when that attack on the United States happened. And there's a lot of things that have happened since then. And there's a lot of details that maybe some people don't realize or remember from that day. So I was going to take a minute here to sort of walk you through this day and kind of explain to you why this is such an important day in our history and talk about not only the tragedy, but some of the legacies that have come out from there as well. So in order to do that, I need to take you back to what life was like pre 9/11. And so this was the skyline of New York City, the Twin Towers there, those two giant buildings. These were, whenever you saw this picture, you immediately identified the city as New York, because there's no other city that had buildings like this. I mean, it's very similar to seeing like the Coit Tower or Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And so these was a very important image to New Yorkers and to Americans and other people, just because of what it sort of symbolized in terms of the look of the city. Then we kind of fast forward to that morning of September 11, 2001 on the East Coast. And obviously 3 hours later in the day here in the West Coast, we were just starting to kind of get going in the day. And I myself was walking into my classroom. I was an English teacher back then. And we started getting reports, which at first didn't make a lot of sense. Like there had been an airplane accident. Airplane had hit one of the buildings in New York City. And so we, turned on the TV to kind of say, well, what's going on? And this, I remember very clearly, was one of my first images of seeing the tragedy unfolding. Was that we saw the building on fire, and then almost immediately after I turned the TV on, this second plane hit the building, and we knew right then that we were under attack. And the rest of that day was really a very numb and chilling day, sort of watching the events unfold. And so, just thinking about that particular time, again, I remember where I was and who was in the room and all those kinds of things when this really started happening. What we also had was that as the emergencies unfolding, we started getting all these police officers and firefighters that were rushing into the building to try and help those who may be trapped or injured, which is when another part of the tragedy happened, because as a lot of the firefighters and police officers were in the building, the two towers actually collapsed and fell, and killing more people than had originally been killed. And so on this day, there were almost 3,000 people that lost their lives. And so there were citizens of over 78 countries. It wasn't just Americans. We do think of this as an American tragedy, but really it was a world tragedy. At the World Trade Center itself, where those two buildings were, 2,763 people died after those two planes hit the tower. After the towers collapsed, there were another 343 firefighters and paramedics that died in the building. There were 23 New York police officers and 37 Port Authority police officers who were there, again, trying to save people. And so, one of the tragedies of that day is the loss that for generations of firefighters and police officers in the city of New York. And again, their heroism going into the burning buildings and trying to save people, and then actually losing their lives as well. This was a very common scene too, that a lot of the footage going out of the people leaving New York. The black and white photo you see over there, it's just debris everywhere, people covered in dust, because as the buildings went down, you can imagine there was a lot of dust and debris that just kind of floated up into the air. And then you can see that in the other picture where it sort of looks like a fire behind them, but that's actually the dust settling from the buildings going down. And you see all those people walking out, that there was no other way to leave the city. They had to actually leave on foot because there was a fear that there might be more terrorist attacks happening that day. So really almost a scene out of a movie, that almost too grand to sort of put your head around, but this is the events that were unfolding and we were seeing in front of us at that particular time. Again, what some people often forget or don't even realize is that the Pentagon was also under attack that day. The third plane had been hijacked and flown into the Pentagon. It was obviously they were trying to do more damage, but they didn't do as much as they were hoping to do. Did clip part of the building there, and as a result, there were 189 people who were in the building and on the airplane that died that day. 64 were on American Airlines Flight 77 that crashed into that building that day. There was also a fourth plane that was hijacked and went down in a field in Pennsylvania. And the story behind this one was the theory was that the hijackers were going to try and take this one into Washington, D.C. to go fly towards the Capitol or towards the White House. And news started coming through to the plane. They knew they were being hijacked. They knew that these other attacks had happened. And so the people on the plane fought back, and they actually caused the airplane to crash. And while all of them lost their lives, There were 44 people on the plane that day. They prevented further tragedies from happening. And so there are memorials in each of these places. And if you visit each one of these, you will see those. But again, all of those 3 areas, that totals up to the almost 3,000 people that died that day. As the tragedy unfolded, the questions went to who started this, why did this happen, what was going on. Osama bin Laden is the person you see pictured there. He was the mastermind behind this. He was associated with a group called Al Qaeda, who definitely had some ill feeling and desires to do damage to the United States based on a lot of our political and beliefs and some of our freedoms and things that he and his groups did not appreciate or like. He recruited these 19 men that you see in the pictures over there, and those are the ones that were on those 4 different planes that crashed into the building that day. Osama bin Laden was not in any of those planes. He, as the mastermind, was on the ground doing his own thing. He was killed several years later as he was tracked down by one of our Navy SEAL teams. But one of the legacies of this particular attack was, you see the military helicopters and the military personnel right there. That's our military landing in the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. Right after this happened, about a month later in October, the US military started striking out against the Taliban and against Al Qaeda in retaliation for what they had done on September 11th. And then by November, we were in Afghanistan fighting a war that just ended here just a few days ago. And so just to kind of flash forward you here a few minutes, a few years, I was on the announcement the other day talking about why our flags are at half staff. And these 13 military folks lost their lives on that attack as they were trying to withdraw troops and civilians to safety after leaving that country. These were the 13 individuals who lost their lives that day, along with about 90 other Afghani citizens. And so I did not have their names in, so I thought I would take a moment to read their names. David Espinoza, who was age 20 of Rio Bravo, Texas. Nicole G, 23 of Roseville, California. Darren Taylor Hoover, who's age 31 of Utah. Ryan Naus, 23 of Corryton, Tennessee. Also age 22, Hunter Lopez from Indio, California. Riley McCollum, age 20 from Jackson, Wyoming. Dylan Marola, 20 of Rancho Cucamonga, California. Kareem Nicoy, 20 of Norco, California. Dagon William Taylor Page, 23 of Omaha. Johnny Rosario, age 25 from Lawrence, Massachusetts. Humberto Sanchez, 22 from Logansport, Indiana. Jared Schmitz, 20 of Wentzville, Missouri. And Max Soviak, 22 of Berlin Heights, Ohio. So wanted to take a moment to recognize those who lost their lives, again, in this continuing aftermath of this horrible day, but wanted to tie that together for you. And, that day was a horrible day. And every year since then, there have been celebrations or commemorations of what happened, of celebrating the lives of those people who were lost. You'll see every single president since George Bush, who was the president at the time during the attack, has done some sort of commemoration and honoring of those who died that day. And it is something that, again, still feels very painful to a lot of people. Those of us who remember the day, those of us who may have known people or lost family members or have a strong feeling for our firefighters or for police officers. Again, that legacy still continues on. And so, not only is this become a day of mourning because it's a truly sad day in our history, but there is also some very positive things that have come out of here and some things where people hold on to some very hopeful ideas and thoughts. And so there are, as I said, memorials now built in all these particular areas. One of them that you might see if you're in New York are these 2 twin beams of light that shoot up right from where the buildings used to stand. And so you can still see kind of see the Twin Towers where they were and what they meant to the New Yorkers. It's a very stirring sight. But again, it's meant to be not just to celebrate or to commemorate them on 9/11, but to commemorate them and those who lost their lives every day of the year. And again, there are some very touching stories that come out of the tragedy here. And, looking at people's really good sides, when people were leaving New York there, you saw those people, they looked tired, they looked scared, they were hurt. They were, New Yorkers who'd never met each other, and New Yorkers weren't ever really known to be friendly. They were kind of known as these gruff, kind of individuals, but they were all sorts of stories of people taking other people in for the night, even though they didn't know them, or giving them water, or giving them food, or letting them take a shower so they could get the debris off of them. And so coming together in that time of need, and it really has become a unifying thing in New York and around the world. To see some of those images. This was one that had really stuck with me when I went to the 9/11 memorial. This is one of the plaques that's out there, and there's plaques that rim where the buildings used to be, and their names are etched into this brass plaques. And every day there is a florist in New York who takes white flowers, white roses, and puts them in the names of those people whose birthday it is that day. And so you get to see a very touching tribute to folks who are no longer around, but knowing it brings some comfort to their family members that there's people out there thinking and maybe even wishing their loved ones a happy birthday, even though they're no longer around. So just something as simple as that. And again, for 20 years, this person has been doing this, and it's brought a lot of comfort and joy to those who didn't have a lot to celebrate regarding this. This one has always been a story that stuck with me pretty significantly, and it's the story of the survivor's tree. And I've talked about this before in some of our memorials, but there was, as you saw, total wreckage and debris around the buildings. This tree you see on the left side there was actually one of the trees that they saved that day, because again, as you can see, it was broken, it was burned, it didn't have much life to it, but there was some bits of life still there. So they decided to try and save it. They took it to a nursery, they nursed it back to health, and eventually it planted it back at the memorial there. And you see the tree in the middle there that's green with the railing around it. That's the survivor's tree. That's the very same tree. So a tree that was broken, burned, probably could have or should have been thrown away, and like some of the other debris there, actually was saved and is now this beautiful living monument to being able to survive something like this and being able to move forward and still be beautiful. And that's what, one of the things that I hope you walk away with today is again, thinking about those who lost their lives, thinking about those who are still in pain regarding this, even though it's 20 years ago, it's still very fresh in a lot of people's minds. Again, 78 countries, 3,000 people. But that there is also hope that has come out of here. That there are times like this where we can band together and come together and help each other out and be human and be kind. And so Homestead, that's what I would like you to take away from this. And as you're going around the next day or maybe the next 9/11, and when we're celebrating the 21st anniversary of it, that you think about ways in which you can be kind and compassionate and be a human being to those who might need your help, because everybody is going through some sort of tragedy, some sort of struggle. And so that is something that I think is the legacy I wish that we could still have from this, but know that there is other, deep meanings behind a lot of things that go on for 9/11. But I thank you for taking the time, and I wish you the best of days. So thank you very much for taking the time here.